Have you ever experienced that moment of sitting in the car with a child who's just played sport and they're being really hard and down on themselves? They don't feel like they played very well. They don't feel like they contributed. They don't feel like they did their team proud. How do you have conversations at that moment which build their character and build their potential as parents?
It's one of those challenges that we all face, isn't it, as parents, is that you've got a young person there who's probably ready either to start to be very critical, self-critical, or they're going to be critical of others. They're going to start to put excuses out there. And, on the one hand, if they're making excuses and you feel like there's something they can learn, how do you draw attention to something they can learn about themselves without making it a conflict? But likewise, if they are being self-critical, how can you reframe the conversation so that it becomes a positive learning opportunity rather than then just being really negative about themselves?
Definitely, which is why we'd like to invite you to sign up for a free course of 10 videos from Stu Armstrong from The Talent Equation and myself, Richard Shorter, aka Non-Perfect Dad. And in these videos, we're going to give you insights and support as to how to have those conversations and turn that really painful moment into a productive moment.
That is an excerpt from a new course I've created with Non-Perfect Dad, Richard Shorter himself. And it's a series of 10 conversations that we've recorded looking at all aspects of being a sports parent or a parent who coaches. If you want to find out more, head on over to Conversations for Growth, that's the number 4.co.uk, and you'll be able to get access to a free course, 10 emails that will hit your inbox and give you some top tips around how to stimulate some of those conversations with the young people that you've got involved in sport.
Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
This week, I'm really interested because this is a long time coming, this conversation. We've had a number of false starts, failed attempts, mostly my fault, hectic scheduling and various different things going on. I'm joined by Ted Suikonen, which I'm probably pronouncing poorly. Ted, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and you nailed it on that one, so it's all good.
We did do a little rehearsal. I will, full disclosure, I will give that one away. So, hey, Ted, great to have you on. Glad we could get this sorted out. You've got an interesting story, and I don't know how much you're going to go into, but tell everybody a little bit about kind of your I guess, journey in this crazy world of coaching and kind of what you do now on a day-to-day basis.
I've been a big fan of your show for a long time, and we've reached out, and it was nice to be, finally come on here. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of ice hockey coaches, so I deal in ice hockey. I'm a professional coach, skill specialist over here in Russia in the KHL, our top league in Russia for HC Locomotiv. But my beginnings start way back in Virginia, Minnesota. So grew up in the north part, playing hockey my whole life, college hockey, junior hockey, and then ventured into the pro side of it over in Europe for 4 or 5 years. Moved back and got into coaching when I was about 26 years old, and went back to the States, coached up in Alaska, and then Sweden, Norway, and finally made my way to behind the Iron Curtain over here.
You just love being cold then, basically.
Apparently, it's in the blood.
So just talk me through kind of the coaching so you've worked across a number of different countries, a number of different contexts. Always in the ice hockey domain, I assume?
I was in the ice hockey domain. Like when I retired from playing, it was kind of like that void where you wanted to stay within the game but didn't know what to do. So I got into coaching boys hockey. It'd be about U18 age back in Alaska, and very raw. Everything was about old. All my old coaches doing, so just trying to get behind the bench, and eventually made myself as a head coach up in Alaska for the U18s in a high school league, and then had the chance to come over to Sweden where my wife is from. So I jumped over that on that opportunity. We moved back to Sweden to coach in the Pro League, and coached there, junior hockey as well. But sitting behind the bench, there was always something missing. I don't know what it was, but there was just something missing where it felt like the skill area for myself was more what I was attuned to. And that's when I started my own company and started really diving into actually the other sports, American football, soccer, and trying to figure out what the different ways to teach skill and to try to get the most out of players was. And that's where my love really got into coaching, and that's how I got over here to Russia then later.
And so you've been very much focused in terms of your coaching world in that kind of talent development, younger player on that skill development journey, and hence you're operating now in the sort of skill development arena.
Right. So like I always had my company where we did camps and everything else, and that thing has evolved so much. It's sad to see myself, like you see old videos of what I used to do back in 2005 and 6 to what I do now. So it's kind of nice to see what the journey was. And when I decided to start going, I started to have a number of pro players from Sweden and Norway, Finland, playing in the NHL and the top Swedish leagues. And that's where I really found my groove on how to get through to the people, seeing how they worked in different contexts, again, on a personal note. And that translated into my camps for my younger kids that I would work on during the summer. And, just through connections and everything else, I got over here to Russia. And as we spoke on Twitter, I work primarily with our junior players. So their age is 17 to 19 years old, 20 years old, some of the top ones there. And over the last couple of years, we've had about 14 guys get drafted into the NHL. So, finding that domain and that pressure point where you just love was a very big key for myself.
And so I guess a little bit like me, it's interesting, isn't it, how as you go on your journey, you think that the destination you might be, well, I think when most people start out on their coaching journey, they think their destination is to be kind of like coaching a pro team or coaching kind of like a national squad or something along those lines. But like some people, you find that's probably not where your true passion and your true love is. Your true love is seeing individuals develop and then kind of seeing them progress. And so I think I'm a bit like you. I found almost like the grind of working week to week with a senior side, trying to get results and these sorts of things, to become a bit dissatisfying. And so actually, where you see individual growth in young people, for me, there's something just far more exciting about that than there is about the wins and losses of, the week to week stuff.
Oh, you're so spot on there. And you're right though. Like when I quit playing, you had like that time where you coach U18s, U16s, and your dream is like, okay, now I didn't make it as a player to the top league. Now I can make it as a coach.
Yeah.
And like you say, you see the struggles of the players, and the part that really bothered me, or that really started to intrigue me, I guess you could say, was that when they get to a certain area or to a certain level, they kind of stop developing, or they kind of not stop developing, but stop seeking help sometimes because they don't know who to go to or what the person is going to be seeing or what they're actually there for. And for me, that was kind of that part where it was like, okay, well, I have a personality that I can connect with people. I have an eye where I know I've been to certain levels and everything else. So let's see if we can try to grow this. And what you see now with players, especially that I work with, that open door policy where they're able to come into you and be free with their emotions or be free with what they think, is so key that they don't usually get that as a head coach or an assistant coach of a team.
And so you're developing that stronger connection with an individual as they're on this journey. The interesting thing about that, though, is I imagine, I know certainly this was the case for me, is that challenges you in a lot of different ways, because when you're like the head coach, I mean, I would argue that actually when you're the head coach,
Right.
the greatest head coaches create really great connections. But some people, as the head coach, they feel that they've got to have a distance. And so you don't build that kind of connection with players. Whereas in your role, connection's almost everything, because you've really got to get underneath the motivation. You've got to get underneath what's going on in the rest of their lives. You've got to understand, where are the pressure points coming from, and peers and parents and schools and all these sorts of different ideas. And so from that perspective, it's a totally different set of skills, I would say. But it's quite challenging as well,
Right.
because nobody teaches you that.
No, no, nobody does teach you that. And you always remember back to like when you were playing, I'm talking about like 80s and 90s, 2000s, a little bit early parts. Your coach, like you said, they were always a little bit distant. And you as a player were always a little bit more guarded, because if you brought something up to the coach, you usually just got barked at or told to figure it out yourself. And then you also had that stigma too, where if you went up to the coach and tried to ask questions or whatnot, you always got that stigma from the other guys in the locker room that you're a butt sniffer or whatever you want to call it. And so it was always kind of like that thing where it's like, well, there's got to be a better way. There just has to be. And especially with kids like late teens or preteens, there's so much emotion and so many different things happening, like you mentioned. And I think when they have that little bit of an outlet, because we do work with the head coach, we do work with the assistant coach on the team to make sure that we're guiding the guys in the right way, that they keep contributing, but they don't go against the philosophies of the club and the team. But they also know that all of our conversations, what we speak about, that's confidential. It's almost like a psychiatrist office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like when we get out on the ice, you can just see the freedom off their shoulders happen, which is nice.
And so how would you describe your role then now? I mean, it's kind of it's not a role that you hear about a lot. It's not, I mean, it's more commonplace in ice hockey than I know about, but in my mind, it's like, what is the role?
Well, that's funny, because it's like you see like a lot of the NHL teams, they have like a lot of skill coaches. And those guys are more of a part-time kind of deal, where they just come in from time to time to work on skating or whatnot. And then most of the people that are in our industry, they're just private people that are running camps, running businesses. So what we have here in Locomotiv is that they actually hire us to make sure that we're driving development through all the way up into the pro ranks and beyond that. Which is nice, because they're putting the money back into the players here. So it's a full-time job where you're at the rink 8 days almost every day, and meetings as far as videos and all that. So it is a rare one, where I was just discussing with our general manager today. From August, we've already had 150 ice trainings in two and a half months. Which is insane on the brain sometimes there, but the positivity part about it is that what they've seen over the last 2.5 years is that the players wanting to always come onto the ice. They're wanting to practice more. They're wanting to get better, where that feeling wasn't there before.
How many hours are each of those training sessions?
They're only 45 minutes.
Oh, so it's short and sharp, punchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still.
And we have most of them are 45-minute long. Our shortest ones are about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that's in, out, work on a couple things and just make sure the quality of what we're trying to do is there, not just the quantity that we don't want.
And so essentially, I mean, 45 minutes, give or take, so it's just nearly 140 odd hours of ice time in 2.5 months. I mean, that's once a day. Is that right? More or less?
About that. Yeah, about once a day. And then Sorry, go ahead.
No. And if they're coming to you once a day, how are you shaping that? Are they coming as a group? Are they coming as individuals?
We have it mixed. Most of the time, we have them in as groups of 5.
Okay.
So what we'll see, and I know like every player is not like a snowflake, right? Everybody's so different. But what we try to do is we're trying to see common problems that are happening within games or within movements that we see on the players, and we'll group them in the groups of 5, and we'll bring them in there, even though they're not exactly the same. They're within the same realm that we're trying to work on. So the sessions are all videoed on ice, so we have instant feedback, and getting groups of 5 gives us that area that we have that one-on-one pressure, 1 against 2 pressure. So we have the realism within the drill itself.
So are they coming then to you saying, I've kind of got this challenge or this problem, how can you help me with it? Or are you kind of, to a certain extent, pre-designing that with them, and then when they hit the ice, you've kind of got the practice design sorted based on their needs? Or are you working through kind of like a player development curriculum that basically means that they're going to be coming to you, working on a particular component, you're creating kind of that environment for them, and then they're exploring within it? How does it kind of work for you?
Well, the whole thing, how we work on that, it's a collaboration between us and the athlete. And we'll break down game video with the athlete, and I'll come up with areas that I believe that are of problem areas, if you want to call it that, or areas of weakness. And they will come up and they'll say yes or they'll say no, and we'll kind of find that medium ground. And it's funny because my translator, and he's also my sidekick, Anton, there really isn't any kind of practice design. Like there's usually like one concept that I'll have when we get on the ice, and I'll feed off that through each rep. So we don't waste time like drying things up. We just kind of go by feel the whole time with them.
Okay, that's interesting. I kind of okay. So I mean, interestingly, that's quite similar to the way I operate. And I'm interested I think that's just I'd like to explore that with you, because I'm just selfishly, I'd be interested to sort of work out kind of how your method is linked to mine.
Yeah. It's like, how do we explain it? Like, we have a couple guys, they're all left-handed shots. So naturally, if we're going to do a weight shift on a fake or something, going to our right is always going to be our strongest area. And these 3 guys that we have, going to their left, they always cheat it. And when we're watching them in games, they will always predetermine themselves by trying to fake a little bit more or run out of room onto the sideboards, going to their right, so they can cut back into their left side. So that going to the left is very easy. But what we see is that these guys are premier players at the top level here. And now they're just, the defenders are just kind of like blocking that away. They're just staying in the middle and getting that outside, so they have no more options coming in.
Right.
So what we'll do is we'll just call that one of our concepts that we're on the ice with. And we'll just block off. We'll use a bunch of cones, not to go around, but just to cut that area of the ice off.
Yeah.
Absolute, just block it off so they can't use it. And then what I'll do is just have guys standing there stationary, coming at them. So they're not moving at the start, but they're moving their sticks a little bit so that they're trying to find that space, find that areas. But they're having to use it, go from left to right, using their weak sides. And then eventually we'll just start taking away the cones, giving them back the ice, and start seeing how they're actually moving. But within that, usually I'll see something else that's a problem. as we all do. And then it's just something like just adding a different piece of equipment, just trying to stop an area where they want to go. Or putting nets up and just blocking off an area so they have to shoot from a different side. But it just constantly evolves.
Okay, that's interesting. So in this particular instance, you're looking at a particular aspect of of skilled performance that's limited, in the sense that you've got an athlete that essentially struggles to perform an action when skating in one direction, and so therefore has created an adaptation that that means that, but that becomes a performance limiter or a rate limiter eventually, because eventually the defenders are tuned to the movements, and then they've no longer got the opportunity to be able to score. So you deliberately use, from what I heard there, you use a spatial constraint through basically just blocking off a particular area in the ice, which directs where they can move towards, and you use and then you're using you constrain slightly what a defender can do, so as to not create too much noise in the practice, to enable them to still within that explore ways in which they can, get the puck on goal, I guess. And then they get a lot of goes at that, so you get the repetition without repetition. There's enough variability there. And they get enough goes at that to be able to develop different kind of movement patterns. Now, I'm assuming within that, you mentioned you see another problem, so you then kind of have to react to that problem. But what that might be is you just see that they adapt in a way that may or may not be more or less effective for them, so you draw their attention to other possibilities. Is that right?
Right. And usually what we'll say is like, we'll have the video and we'll video almost each rep that they have. And they're always wanting to look at it after. That's how every player is here. But it's always like, I was asking, like, how did it feel? Like, and describe the feeling of like how the ankle, did you feel more push? Did you feel anything? And they'll start describing, like, it felt comfortable, but my right elbow was catching across my waist when I'm trying to come across, and the stick. And so then you start looking at the left side. You wanted to see like what's happening with where your stick is at. So we start to maneuver around those areas. But like when I really start to complicate it for them, I start adding the passing plays in, so you get the cognitive part as well. Because like instead of just being able to systematically continue on a 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 1 thing, we want to be able to see how you're going to explore it coming off of making a pass, jump into that free space, and trying to see that extra areas that you can get to later.
Okay, so you might add an extra dimension into it afterwards.
Exactly. And that's kind of like how it just evolves back and forth.
But it sounds to me like you say there wasn't any practice design. There really is.
There is, but there's no paper.
Okay.
Like it's up in this head, and that's because Anton, like, he's my translator, so he's always coming out. He's like, so what do we got today? Where do you need stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I have it in my head. I just want to see how it's going to go from here. And then it just keeps evolving, because every time we're so active watching and doing stuff, and sometimes we act as defenders or give them a little bit of push, right?
Yeah.
And then you're starting to see things. You're like, okay, here it comes. He's like, okay, now I see. Now I start to understand. So he's starting to catch on with my stuff, which is fun.
It's interesting though, because I think there's quite a lot to that, in the sense of I have become increasingly like that, in terms of I often start from a game problem.
Right.
I don't, because I'm working in a more community context, we don't always have game film. In fact, we don't have game film. And so, but what I'm doing with players is not necessarily always working backwards from what I've seen in games, although sometimes we do that. But in general, I'm working more towards kind of like a developmental curriculum. So, for example, I'll know, right? So I'll work around a theme, and the theme might be, at the moment, in fact, I'm working on collective defense. So I'm looking at how I can work with the players to get them to begin to attune to what is it that the team that are bringing the ball out, it's like a pressing thing, the team that are trying to bring the ball out and kind of get the ball forward, how can they collectively move most efficiently in order to win the ball in an advanced area, so that they can launch a rapid counter attack. So that's kind of the theme I'm working on at the moment. So I'm working within that theme quite a lot, and I might start with kind of an initial idea. So there'll be like a game idea, and And the idea will be, right, they're going to try and get the ball there, there's points to be gained, and then we play it in a certain way. And then a little bit like you, what I found is if I go beyond that, if I start to kind of plan beyond that initial idea, then I almost sort of pre-constrain myself too much. And then what that does is that makes me less attuned to what's happening with them. So I find by not having, almost like I constrain myself by not planning beyond that initial concept idea. Because what I then do is I then watch what's happening, and then I attune to how they're responding to the practice, and rarely is it right first time. And so then I'll make adjustments to the practice or tweaks in order to sort of tighten it up, and kind of put a bit more focus on the actual area.
Exactly. And I like that too, because like I said, like when I look back at things I did back, say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I first started out, I make myself cry. It's like, it's so terrible. Like at the time you thought it was so great, but now it's just like, oh my God, why was I doing that? And then when I write out my practices and say you have an hour, and all of a sudden you start scheduling drill after drill after drill after drill, you're more of a time watcher instead of a player watcher. And you're worried about getting through all the stuff that you planned out, but not really caring if the guys got the concepts, if they got the principles about what you're trying to get across. And since I've done this over the last, say, 5 years or so, the best part about it is that I know I want the players' minds and the players' brains to be free and creative on the ice. It also frees mine up.
Yeah.
Because now I'm in tune, seeing what the situation, the environment is giving them. And that actually helps me be able to give my perspective to them and to see what they're actually perceiving as well.
And that's an important point, I think, that idea of to see what they're perceiving. So how do you go about determining what they're perceiving?
Well, a lot of times I'll follow them.
Ah, okay.
Like on their movements, like, I'm not having 60 kids on the ice. I only have, say, 5 guys, 10 guys. And I will go behind them the whole time. Yeah, luxury of it. It's a beautiful thing. No, but like when I have like a camp, I don't have that luxury. So you'll have 20 guys on the ice, right?
Sure.
But in my main job, I have that luxury. So I'll follow the player. So I'm trying to see exactly what he's seeing, so I can try to give my perspective as well.
Yeah.
Than just from a video.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, now I'm starting to understand. Or I'll go right behind the defender the whole time, and now I'm looking at their eyes. Are their eyes scanning the ice? Are their eyes looking for the different areas where they can jump or whatnot?
Yeah, so what I'll do sometimes, and I wonder if you do something similar, I'd be interested to see if you got any thoughts on this, is sometimes I can't quite tell whether they're attuning. So, for example, for me, if I've designed the game right, the game should be like a spotlight laser beam saying to the players, you got to do this to be successful, right? If I've designed the game right. Now, more often than not, I haven't. So I haven't got the spotlight, like it's not bright enough, right? It's not shining at them enough. So what I've got to do is I've got to constrain the practice in some way. So what I'll quite often do is manipulate the practice to see if I can get that light to shine brighter. And then sometimes even that doesn't quite work, and then I have to go into clue giving mode, right? So that's when we might come in and I might pose a question, and like I might say, Fred, what do you notice about the game? Or kind of like, what is this game asking you to do? Or how do you get successful in this game? What is it that you need to do in this game to be successful? And it's quite amazing actually how kind of unaware sometimes of the actual purpose
point.
They're just doing it, and it's like almost like blindly, mindlessly doing it. And so for me, that's my kind of big task sometimes, is to get, I'm not necessarily saying that I want them to be consciously cognitive of it, but I want them to at least have a sense of, hey, we're all trying to do this together. Unless we all share in the ways of becoming successful, we're all just basically doing our own thing, and that isn't necessarily going to bring us success. So I guess the process for me is initial concept, strengthen the concept, try and make the light shine brighter, And then if I can't do that, then I try and make the light shine brighter by drawing their attention to where they might find the answer. So they begin to look where the light might be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense. And it's actually funny. Like, we always talk about making sure that the players are always cognitive about what they're doing. Because otherwise, if they don't, they're just doing it to do it. And I think you get good to a point, but if you don't have that understanding about why you're doing what you're doing, what's the point of the practice then? You're just getting a good sweat. Everybody wants a good sweat, and it's good for weight control and heart, your heart. But when we're out there, we always make sure that there's a purpose, and the brain is the number one that's for us right now. Making sure that they're seeing what they're supposed to be seeing. And when they don't, that's the tough part.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is, like, sometimes before practice, we'll sit in a video room here, and we'll make them talk as a group.
Right.
We'll give them the concept about what that practice is going to be about, and we ask them, what do you guys think you guys should be getting out of this?
Okay.
And that's kind of the clue that we give. And it's a little bit tougher here, especially in Russia, because everybody's got to get translated. They don't speak English that much.
Yeah.
And my Russian is very rudimentary at the moment. But the fun part is that now that we're with these guys for a few years, they're really starting to get the concepts, and they're starting to surprise me with answers that they're coming up with for their solutions.
Okay. And
most of the time that you start seeing it, when they get on the ice, you talk to them and they're like, I felt this before in a game where it was like a deja vu event. And you're like, okay, so what happened in the game? Like, well, in the game, this guy wasn't there, or that defender came up a little bit closer to me. So now what I want to be able to do is find that area. And you're like, bang on, because we talked about this before. And then all of a sudden it starts to come back and repeat itself in their heads. But you're right, though. If you don't give the clues, if you don't, put that cognition on them, that spotlight's never there sometimes. It's just, let's run through it.
And that's a misunderstanding. I mean, you probably know that I have some disagreements with colleagues of yours in ice hockey who one of the things they argue about on the whole ecological dynamic side of things is that, the role of cognition. And it's based on just a misunderstanding that, that ecological dynamics suggests that there is no cognitive process. Of course there is. We've got brains. They do stuff. But the difference is that it's their assumption is that it only works one way, which is that you must have a kind of cognitive stimulus in order to behave in a certain way. And I'm working the other way around. I'm saying, look, here's an environment. Now, this environment is going to ask things of you. I'm not saying this explicitly, but I just create an environment. Rarely do I very rarely start the session saying, today we're working on this. I do sometimes. Sometimes I might say, here's the theme, but often I'm just saying, here's again. And then through the activity, I'll say, right, so what do you think this game's about then? What do you think this game's asking of you? And kind of getting them to work backwards a little bit from that. But even before that, I'm still trying to manipulate the environment so that, I can tell whether they're reacting to it well enough or not. I can see it. You can almost see there's like this. I describe this like it's like a flock of starlings. You can see if these players are attuning to the information and acting. If they're not, you can see the spacing's wrong. They're not flocking to areas to win the ball in a particular area. They're staying spaced out. Because they're not clearly. Some are disengaged. Some are thinking I've got to go to the ball. Some of them are following. Others are thinking I don't have to do anything. So actually by focusing the game, so I change the game. So how do I change the game? Okay, right, now there's 15 points on that space now. If they get the ball there, they get 15 points instantaneously. Right, now that flock has to work differently now, because otherwise they're going to get 15 points and lose. So now they have to co-adapt, and it's co-adaptation or co-adaptation under constraints, and then they co-adapt. Now if they don't do it, then I have to go in and start to set. And now I have to make them more explicitly aware. But I'm not telling them. I'm saying, and I use this phrase a lot, is I'm sharing with them where they might find the answer. I'm trying to draw their attention to the place in which an answer could be found without ever going, guys, you need to do this. Now, okay, I'm not saying have never ever done that. Well, there's times when actually, because you're limited on time, you just got to go there sometimes.
Right.
But in general, you're trying to avoid. But whereas I think for a lot of what you might call technique-led coaches, and I think you were describing this when you said that you made yourself cry. Technique-led coaches work the other way around. They're explicit from the start. It's got to look like this.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, I just was thinking about this now too, as you were speaking. Like, we're talking about the perception stuff, and we're talking about the environment and trying to lead the cognition.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like, if I have, we'll talk about a game situation that we see, like a percentage of where our guys will be. And as they're going through it, I will have them speak about what they're seeing as they go.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're going like not at a game speed level. But as they're moving through it, I ask them, like, what do you see on the right? What do you see on the left? Are there spaces here? And my assistant coach may be moving in these different areas. So as they're doing stuff, they're scanning, they're using, they're talking, and just trying to get them to that level of cognition, always being able to scan, always being able to see. And what I don't understand is that a technique led, and I've been there, I started there, and I've evolved from that in a different way. But there is no absolute technique in anything we do.
No.
It drives me insane. Like when we have templated skating strides, templated shooting mechanisms, all these kind of different things where it's templated out about what they want to be able to see. But then I ask coaches or I ask players, how often do you see that in the game? When are you actually in that full stride movement? Yeah. When you take a shot, are you always in that same position, or are you cutting? Are you on one foot, on the round foot? Are you leaning back? Everything changes. And the prime example for me is my son is now 6 years old, and he started playing hockey last year, actually. And everybody says technique is first. Well, when my son started skating, he was all over the ice. He didn't know how to balance. He couldn't stand up on his skates. And then you get him a chair. And then he pushed himself around on the chair on the ice, right? So they have that balance aspect.
Yeah.
Then you take away the chair because he kind of gets that balance aspect. And it was just like over a couple months, then he finally started skating. But there was no time as a skill specialist that I could step in there and say, you have to bend your knees, you have to keep your head up, and you have to learn this technique, because they learn by doing. Can you refine it later? Of course, we can always refine things. But there's got to be, I was talking with Fergus Connolly about this, there's got to be some kind of correlation between the two. If you find something wrong in the technique, of course you can go back and isolate it quickly about what you see about a principle of the technique, but then you got to throw them back into the action again.
Yeah. I think one of the things for me with children, sorry, go on, carry on. Sorry.
No, I just don't think you can say like how a lot of people say, like, it's either this or it's either that.
Yeah.
It's a blend.
Sure. I think the difference for me though is where the starting point is.
Right.
So for me, one of the things I'm kind of unequivocal on is that the starting point in skill acquisition has to be the game demands.
Right.
As opposed to the organismic requirements. So, it's Newell's triangle, the dynamics between the task, the environment, and the individual. Well, most people start from the perspective of the individual. So they devise the individual strength capabilities, the individual psychological capabilities, the individual technical capabilities, the tactical capabilities. They develop all of those things and then apply them into an environment with a given task, and assume that all those things are going to translate out when in that environment, in those dynamics. And for me, I feel that that's the bit that's flawed, because how can you know? If you're not pulling back from the environment and the task and the specific dynamics of the environment of the task, and then working out what that means for an individual, whether that be technically or physically or whatever it is, if you're not working that way, how can you be accurate in knowing that the stuff that you're working on is going to transfer or going to translate or even going to be relevant to that individual? The assumption is that they can kind of connect the dots. You give them this base level of movement patterning, and then they can build a adaptation on top. I'm just not convinced of that argument.
Well, I think like what happens is like if you look at it from a different way, like if you work on all these different techniques or all these different skill patterns or sequences, like a lot of coaches want to work on, everybody says, okay, fine. Now there's your next tool. There's your hammer. There's your screwdriver. There's your saw. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden when you get into the game, you're supposed to find it. But what I understand from players when you talk to them, they get handicapped in a way where they're in their head trying to figure out when to use it and not organically just using it.
Bingo.
And all of a sudden, like I remember there's a few times when I first started here and we're breaking down the game videos. And they're like, you're asking, well, what happened there? Because it looks like you have a hesitation. What happened? They're like, well, I really wanted to do a toe drag. So it's a stick handling maneuver. And you're like, why? Well, we were working on it all week last week.
Yeah.
Okay. But you wanted to do it. You tried to set up for it, and you took away every other option you had around the rink. And they're like, okay, yeah, I understand that. Or why didn't you let that shot go? Well, my hips weren't right. My toes weren't facing the net, and it was a little bit too close to the body. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, so then you didn't get the shot, which means you didn't have the opportunity to score. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then it's just that point where everybody wants to bring the conscious to the conscious level, where it's in the forefront, where the subconscious, where you just got to be able to play and organically pull these things out, is where it's going to come from.
Yeah.
And that's where we see, like when we talk about working with techniques, I was speaking with another guy on my podcast. I don't believe there's a technique per se. There's always a principles behind them.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to shoot a puck, there's principles that you need to have, but the technique's going to change every single time you shoot. Mm-hmm. It's the same with skating. If I'm on my inside edge or outside edge, there's no set technique for it. It's just how's your body positioned for that situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And last night, it made me cringe. We had my son had a practice, like an extra practice with somebody. And there was 15 kids, and they stood in line for, I was counting on my watch, about 2 minutes. And there's some kids that were just on their stomach, kicking their skates up in the air. And it was just to be able to glide on one foot.
Right.
And they're 6 years old. They don't need all the instructions in the world on how to glide on one foot. Just let them go and try to find it.
Yeah.
And then I asked my kid on the way home, we're driving home, and same old stuff. Good job, Hall. What's practice? Oh, the games were fun. Okay, but how was the first half hour? That was pretty boring. I didn't sweat. I wasn't thirsty. I was like, okay, But you had fun at the end. You go, oh, yeah, the end was great. And it's funny because there's some of the moves, like I took some videos from my parents back home, just videoing them on the ice, and then send it on Facebook to my mom and dad. And we were talking about it. We're like, these kids were doing some moves organically at 6 years old that they've never been taught, that some of our guys at the pro level or top junior level are doing, and we're trying to master. Like they've never done it before. They never thought about it. But all of a sudden, these little kids are just doing it just to solve a situation. And it's actually fun to see when that stuff kind of starts to happen.
And then what's beautiful about that for me is a number of different things. One is that movement pattern skill, whatever, that's a really resilient thing because it's developed in an adaptive way. And so it can be flexed and built upon, and it can be adjusted according to the demands, because it was developed according to the demands of the environment. So whenever it then comes about again, it can be adjusted according to the demands of the environment. Whereas in the alternative conceptualization, it's what I call a robust skill. Now, the
Right.
difference between robustness and resilience is flexible. Think of a kind of a tree that can flex in the wind versus a tree that's really, really firm. It's robust,
Yeah.
but if it goes, it's catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
It's
so.
like
Sorry, go on.
No, it's like an earthquake-resistant buildings like we have today.
Yeah, they flex, don't they?
Exactly, like that. They're made to withstand earthquakes so that they don't have to be rebuilt later.
Yeah.
Where if you have a robust building where you're having a robust skill, it can work for one situation, but you're always having to rebuild it when it doesn't work again.
Yeah, that's right. And when it does break, the whole superstructure collapses.
It's done. Psychological, everyth's gone on it. But that's the fun thing, because like when you look at these resilient skills, like for me, they've always happened organically. I never had a skill coach growing up, and I played Division I college hockey, junior hockey, and all that kind of stuff. I never had a skill coach. They didn't exist in the 90s and 80s and all that. They exist today, and there's no educational system for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like they never existed then, but somehow we were able to do all these different skills without ever being taught names of them, without ever being shown how and why you're doing them. We just did them. But today, I think it's become too analytical, where if I turn on the TV and I watch the Pittsburgh Penguins and I see Sidney Crosby do some kind of skill, the next day every skill coach in the world is out there doing that exact skill in their practice for that player, or their 7-8-year-old players. For what?
Yeah.
It's to me, it's just mind-boggling the way that the system moves sometimes.
Something you said earlier that I think is really important just to circle back to was when you said about how players who learn techniques then spend all their time wanting to do the technique instead of looking for the moment where they might be required to move in a way that looks like that technique. And I've definitely seen this. A whole generation of field hockey players taught to do a V-drag, so carry the ball right to left, pull the ball back in a V shape, and then go on the opposite direction.
Okay, gotcha.
There's a number of ways of moving in that direction, by the way. It doesn't have to come back. It can come across. It can go through. It can go up. It can go over. But no. The core skill, as it was called, should have been called core technique, but core skill was to pull back and go that direction, right? So there's a whole generation of players who can do this movement beautifully, perfectly, technically correctly, dribbling round cones. It was done hours and hours and hours on end. It's like it would just literally just make your eyes water watching it. And this whole generation of kids, and I can see them because some of them I've been coaching, who can do it perfectly at completely the wrong time over and over again, and won't change because they've developed this robust movement.
And that's the thing, is like we develop that against cones, right?
Sure.
You develop that going in a set pattern over and over and over and over again. And what I see is like if we put a cone there, and you put a stick out, like in field hockey they have sticks as well, so you have an added appendage basically out there that can move. But if you just have a cone on the ice or on the field and they're coming up to it, they'll get so close to that cone to pull off that movement.
Yeah.
And they'll pull it off successfully in practice and continue doing it. But all of a sudden in the game, they're going to pull that move off. They can't read the gap. They can't see what the opponent's feet, their hips, their stick are. They don't know where it's at. They want to get close to it because they got close to the cone. And in our sport, you get hit. And you're on your butt right away. And we have a guy, and it's the same thing. Like he sits at home and he works by himself off ice and does stuff. He was drafted this last year. He's always wanted to do the toe drag, in situations that don't even require it. And he got knocked out, got a concussion last week. Head was down, set up for everything, and boom, done. And now we went back, and he came back and he goes, you know what? I think it's time I stopped doing that. So I was like, well, I go, concussions are negative, but I go, the positive is that there's a brain inside there. So maybe you just woke it up now. But for players, they have to be able to perceive it. I mean, you have to be able to see what's coming, and you have to be able to have that feel. And even for like little kids, instead of using cones, I use people. And I just have like that. If you're going to do a drill, just have that rotation that's going through with the little kids. They just go back and forth, and they rotate through. But every single time, it's a little bit different. But they're going against something that's live.
Yeah. I mean, and that's so key, because how that live thing that you're trying to avoid moves, determines what you do. Because it might be that you do a move and then that thing doesn't react how you expected it to, and now you've got to do another move, or you've got to do a counter move, and you've got to be able to do it on the fly, and you've got to be able to. But if without the thing, you'd never do that. You would just do the move and then go and finish the thing, and that is it. And I can't quite get why. I mean, I'm like you. I did that for years. Yeah. And it's like, but I can't quite get that anymore. I can't even think like that anymore. And I talk about doing 1v0 and stuff like that. And and I think there is a time and a place for 1v0, particularly if you haven't got anyone else. You've got no choice.
That's number one.
Yeah, so go and do something. That's fine. Do 1v0 when you've got no one else. But if you've got other people there, well, they can be useful. They can really help you. Yeah, absolutely. Why you would take 20 kids and go, right, all work individually on a cone. It doesn't make sense. And also, by the way, wait your turn to. Where and you could be just going 1v1,
Right. And like what I have with the guys, especially at this, they're a little bit more open to talking to each other, and they're a little bit more analytical in the brain. I have them talk to each other about what they could have done.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let's say I'm going against you on a one-on-one, and I make a move that I try to predetermine in my head a little bit. Now, you as a defender probably had your stick or you're somewhere else. I have the guys tell them. And then all of a sudden, now you start seeing this communication between the guys. And the guy's like, hey, I have my stick to my right. Why didn't you just give me that fake to freeze me there and cut back the other side? So it's, like there's like that area where, you want players to correct their own a little bit more than a coach does. But now when you can get the players to help each other correct things that they see.
Yeah.
Now you as a coach, you're able to come in there and also give a different kind of a point of view, or, sort of a technique thing that if you want to be able to kick in. But you're letting the guys learn a little bit more on their own, being independent, because, in my opinion, and what you read in the game, they're independent anyway.
Yeah.
I don't have a microphone in their ear telling them which way they're going on the ice.
Yeah.
So, and I just tell them, I also tell the guys, I go, the more communication that we can actually build within each other and everybody else around, the easier the game's going to be, because between shifts and everything else, when you're on the bench, you guys are talking.
Yeah.
You're feeling, you're doing everything. It becomes second nature.
I like that idea, actually. I like the idea of almost, get them in a 1v1 and then go, right, you got to tell your opponent how they can beat you, and then the other one's got to tell the other one how they can beat them. Right. And sort of say, like you said before, because I've seen that before as well, where you go like, right, so you went, and then you had me, right? You had me on toast, but then for some reason you decided to come back, and you gave me another chance. Just keep going, and I was done. And almost get them to talk to each other about, like, here's the moment, that's the time, that's the space. And I think that's really powerful, isn't it? And if you can get players in that mindset, they can really thrive.
It is. I mean, it is very powerful, because now it becomes even more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you build that competition in itself, because you're expressing some of your weak points already. So you're being vulnerable in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, being vulnerable is also giving strength to yourself and giving strength to your opponent, which is at this point would be your teammates.
Yeah.
which is going to make him stronger for when the game time comes against a real opponent.
Yeah, well, it's in your interest too, isn't it? Because I know some of your players are vying for positions sometimes, and so therefore, it makes me think about when I was sort of younger, like late teens, I was studying to be a graphic designer. That was going to be my career path, and my art teacher came and found me on the hockey pitch when I should have been in his art class for the 10th time, and said, I don't think you should do art and graphic design. I think you should have a career in sport. Turns out to be pretty good career advice. But what I was doing was with kind of a good friend of mine who was a defensive player and I was a more attacking player. We just used to go at each other all the time. And he would say to me from a defender's eyes, he'd say, when you get the ball there, if you go there, I can't get you. I can't touch you. So you need to go there. That's my vulnerable place. That's where I'm weak, right? And I would say to him, when I go there, right, if you hold your stick there and hold, I really want to come back and you'll get me because I can't get past. And it was like, we were just there like helping each other to get better because we were on the same sort of team. But that like helps the team, but also that helps each other. And then you get that whole principle of reciprocity idea of the more I give you, the more you give me, and then we together get better.
Exactly. And the other part about it is like, and you've probably noticed this before, that if you as a coach, if you step in and say like, now you got offense and defense at the same time because they're playing a 1v1. Mm-hmm. And you're telling them, well, you had that middle open. So what I want to see you do is I want to see you expose it. Mm-hmm. Well, now the defenders already know what the offense is going to do. They're going to try to get to the middle, then they just cut it off. Mm-hmm. But what I found is that if you have the players talk to each other, like you're just speaking like how you and your friend were, he's exposing each time he goes. Mm-hmm. So if you can talk each time you go, now you don't know what the hell is going to happen the next time.
Yeah.
Because you're giving away your weak points on that last rep, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden on that next rep, you try to expose it, but he covers it. Now he's like, well, on that outside, I was wide open.
Yeah.
You know? So now all of a sudden, you're getting that rep without rep.
Yeah.
But now you're putting in that cognitive state, always on that cognitive state where it's like, okay, now if I make a pre-move to see which one's going to be open, I got that spatial awareness. Everything starts to work itself into reality on it.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me is, conversely, I also see players doing this. Like they might be like, rarely do my players ever get chance to wait for their turn, right? But let's say there is a scenario where they get to wait for their turn. I often hear them going, right, you run there and I'll run there and then you pass it to here and I'll pass it to there. And I go, no, whoa. We're not pre-planning here because what happens if it goes wrong?
When that stuff happens, like sometimes you're like, hey guys, let's be a little bit creative. Like if you got like three guys or something, you just start seeing it. Like I know that little scheming faces and talk.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like you know where they're going to go. You just jump in there as a coach and intercept the pass.
Yeah. And that's for me. That's another reason why you don't want to have cues. You actually don't want to give them the opportunity to be able to make a plan beforehand. Now, I don't mind them if they can find a way to communicate in the action to deter, and develop, and I was talking about this with a friend of mine. He coaches futsal, very dynamic game, lots of stuff going on. And one of the things, it's the England under 19 side. And one of the things they were talking about is like developing almost like a communication shorthand to allow them. And he said they did an analysis of the team who got the video like you have. And in defense, they have really high levels of communication, but when they're in possession of the ball, the communication almost drops off a cliff because everyone's focused on the ball or where they've got to move. So they all go into individual mode. And actually, he's now trying to develop them in offense to have more communication.
Like defense.
Yeah, exactly. Quite challenging, though, I suppose. I guess I've never probably looked at that, but I imagine that's probably true of my players as well.
I think it's true with a lot because, like, when you look at it in the offensive sense, especially when you got a team sport where you got maybe 5 guys in hockey, you got 5 guys on the ice. Football, you got 11. If everybody's focused on the individual with just the ball, who's moving the space?
Yeah.
Because like in hockey, it's the 4 guys without the puck that are going to be the one that makes the puck carrier lethal.
Yes. Yes.
If you're moving away from the puck, or in football, you're moving away from the ball,
Yeah.
he's essentially 1 against 11 or 1 against 5.
Yeah. And what I've found is in the offensive phase as well is that the communication becomes super general. So, for example, it's just players like shouting, "Yeah, Dave, get the ball, Dave!" And I'd rather they say something rather than nothing. But you want them to be way more specific than that,
Yeah.
And I've done this before actually. I've done some exercises where, for example, I'll take away all verbal communication. As a constraint, so I won't allow them to communicate verbally. So they now have to communicate visually using kind of more demonstrative signals, and it also means they have to create a visual connection. Because I often find that when there's the audio available, players will often kind of make a pass to an area because they've kind of heard something or they've got a general sense of something being there. But I kind of want them to begin to attune to, right, I've looked at my opponent, I've looked them in the eye, and I'm seeing where they've asked me to play it, and now I'll play it to that space. And so that kind of taking away the verbal abilities and only having the visual makes them more demonstrative. So now we can then put the verbal back in, but then we can begin to talk about how we verbalize, as well as using our. But what's really interesting is passing accuracy goes through the roof when you got no verbal.
Right.
You've got no choice.
Oh, of course. But like in hockey, they have this bad habit of just banging your stick on the ice.
Okay.
Like just clanking your stick when you want the puck.
As a way to draw attention?
Yeah, for your own teammate to make the pass. And you're sitting there like, it's like, well, didn't you hear my stick? Well, it could have been anybody's stick. Like it's not like a different culture. It's not Chinese or Russian or English or German. It's a stick on the ice. Everybody speaks the same. And it was like, it's funny because we talk about that because guys, sometimes you wonder if they actually understand what the space is that they're trying to get into.
Yeah, definitely.
Like we're watching video and the video comes from high above. So you see a guy clanking a stick on the ice. And then you bring the video up the next day and you're like, why were you banging your stick? He goes, I wanted to pass. Then you look at the other guy and you're like, why didn't you pass to him? Well, there's a defender in the way. So then you're looking at the first guy that wanted the puck on the reception, and he's just like, well, I was open. Yeah, you were open behind the defense.
Yeah. That's
true. And what you had all the space in the world. But there was no way that puck was going to get through to you. So what should you have done?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to put that on both guys because the guy without the puck that was asking for the reception, he should have moved it into space. And the guy with the puck would have been like, well, when we look at that kind of a situation, you know where the open ice is. Put the puck in an area. Let him skate to it. If it's a safe area where you can go where it's not danger, put in the area and lead him to the puck. Lead him to the space.
Yeah.
But I understand what you mean. The communication part about it sometimes is just they talk like little schoolboys inside the locker room, but when you get on the ice or on the pitch, it's quiet.
Yeah. And
you know what I mean?
And you're right. I mean, the sense of you feel like sometimes you're asking the player who's in possession of the ball or the puck to be able to get that visual connection. They can't always get that visual connection because, let's say, they're under pressure or whatever.
Right.
So then they do need a verbal instruction, but that verbal instruction needs to be as precise as a visual signal would be. So it needs to be something along the lines of, but that's where you have to develop that shorthand. So it might be release up ice or release square right or whatever it might be, because then it gives them that clue of where I can place that ball. And it might not be perfect, but at least they're under pressure. That's what they need right there to be able to get that ball there or puck.
Well, that's the fun part. They have like a lot of the NHL games are always mic'd up. A lot of players are mic'd up and the refs are mic'd and everything else. And you can hear the guy. It's constant chatter on the ice, off the glass, aerial it, behind the boards. They're always giving cues. But then when you get onto like the young kids' ice or the juniors' ice, it's quiet. It's so quiet. Yeah. And it's, it's a vital area where we talk in everyday life. Get on the rink and start talking in an effective way as well.
That and actually something you said earlier is really important. This point about I'm just writing it down about this idea of if they know where the space is or they're aware.
Right.
That for me, I think awareness for me, I think is probably the biggest focus of my coaching right now. In fact, it's nearly always is, and again, it's trying to raise awareness of, firstly, what they're trying to achieve collectively or individually, but also then being aware of what is available to them to be able to kind of find progress, whatever that might be. So, and usually for me in dynamic invasion sports, ice hockey, field hockey, football, rugby, whatever, space is the most precious thing, and awareness of it buys you a quarter second, which is the difference between a quality pass or a half pass or an incisive through play or whatever it might be. But because they don't use that space, so I was talking to a couple of players the other night, and what they do is they move, then look.
Yep.
So I'm saying to them, you need. I would know if you were moving, if you were looking then moving, because your first movement wouldn't be where it is. So their first movement takes them directly towards contact point or directly towards an opponent. Now, if they were aware of space, their first movement would take them slightly away from that player, because then that would force the defender to do something, and then they could maybe then do something else. It might be to carry, it might be to release, it might be to whatever it is. But their first movement is blind, it's straight, it's towards where the defenders are likely to have massed themselves.
Taking away that space.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't think about where they move to, or they think they move into false space. They move into an area instinctively where the space is going to get reduced really rapidly. I mean, look, get the ball. I'm going to go directly towards goal. Okay, what are the defenders most likely to do? Most likely to go there. Now, you might go there in order to then create space outside, but they don't do that. They're not thinking like that. They're just literally moving, then having to react, and that's the bit that I'm trying to work on them about.
And that's like when you do the videos with all the players too, from games or whatnot. A lot of video analysis. People look at what happens when you touch the puck, what happens when you didn't catch that pass, or that reception wasn't there, or the pass you tried to give wasn't there. They look at that time of impact basically. But like you just mentioned there, to look deeper into it and to figure out exactly what it is, it's that time before impact. What did you do before? How did you move before? And we see a lot of straight lines always. You see the space, obviously it's going to be there, and you dive right into the middle of it, pop in the bubble.
Yeah.
It's just like it's basically like a pin in a balloon, right through the middle, and then it blows up as soon as you get there because you told everybody where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah. I thinking about it, I was watching the new Google phones launched yesterday, and this will sound like it's a strange tangent, and it is. But they've developed motion sense on the Pixel 4, which is basically radar. They've built radar into a phone, right? So you can now go like this, and you can swipe, right? I think it's like trying to help a player develop perceptual radar. You want them to develop the sense of what are, they're almost like air traffic controllers. They need to know kind of where the planes around them are, or where the where the opponents are, where where the space is, where they can direct into, where they can move into, and they've got to have that radar on the go all the time. But I don't think they switch their radars on half the time. They just live in their own little world and particularly if they've learned to do moves, that radar's never going to be on because all they're thinking about is doing the moves.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's like I saw a tweet the other day. Pep Guardiola was talking about Messi and why he's so lethal.
Yeah.
And he said that when he's on the field, his eyes and his head are constantly scanning.
Yeah.
Looking at where defenders are, finding the weak spots. You're always sensing where players are able to move, what they can't do, what they can do.
Yeah.
And once he gets the ball, he already knows where he's going to go with it because he's already put himself in a position to attack it.
That's right. Yeah.
Where I think a lot of players that have a lot of great technical skills, that have a lot of skills within their toolbox, if you want to say. What happens with them is that they're always in a reactory mood, where when they puck or the football touches their feet or their stick, now is when they're going to start to think about what they're going to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's the undefendable player right there. The one that's got that kind of almost 360 perceptual attunement. Because like I always used to think, why don't they just man mark Messi? Stop him getting the ball. Well, do you not think he's thought of that?
Right.
It's not possible. He's thought of that.
It was the same like with Wayne Gretzky when he played, like they always said he had sixth sense. He could always sense where everything was going to go. You can't man up on them, because they'll just go to an area that's going to pull you out of position, and they're going to expose it later.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're ghosting themselves on the ice or on the field. They'll become a ghost.
Yeah.
Attract you, and then all of a sudden, boom! At that right moment, they're in that space that you just left.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think. I mean, you mentioned earlier on about how. I think that like field hockey and ice hockey are quite similar in lots and lots of ways. There's, there are there's a lot of differences. There's an indoor field hockey. There's an indoor field hockey version that is very like ice hockey. We even use similar formations with kind of like a center court instead of a center ice, and these different ideas. But there's a lot of similarities. But there is also huge differences in the sense of the movement. Actually, now just going back to skating, right? So one of the things that somebody says to me, or people say to me all the time from the world of ice hockey, is you've got to learn to skate properly. And
what's properly?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you said earlier on that it's quite a fairly natural approach that people kind of learn to move on ice over a period of time, and they learn a bit of movement. Now, some people say to me, yes, but you will develop bad movement patterns or ineffective movement patterns that you will then take you a long time to overcome later on. So you need to learn the fundamentals of skating movement, and then you can do all your other movements. Now, I don't know about that. I feel like, and tell me this, right? Obviously, people learn to skate first, then they learn to play hockey once they've learned to skate, sort of. But do you not feel that there's an argument that you should learn to skate with a stick and a puck as early as you can?
You know what? Like, when I first started, it was that prior, right? So let's learn to skate, throw the sticks against the boards. Let's just move the arms and everything else. Yeah. And then we'll put the stick in later when we feel like we have a little bit more coordination or whatnot.
Yeah.
But now it's more like I want the guys with the stick in their hands. Like especially for the younger ages, put the stick in the hands, because it's it adds to your arm. I mean, you got to use it anyways.
Sure.
And you've got to be able to control it. If you can't control it, it's going to throw you off balance.
Yeah.
So you might as well learn to control it right away.
Yeah.
And yes, on average, you got the puck on your stick for about 3 seconds. But you know what? If you can skate with the puck, you can skate without the puck. Yes. The puck's going to add a more – it's the variability that the puck adds, the context, everything that you're going to do with it, it's going to be a lot harder.
Right, yeah.
So why don't we do it anyway then, right away?
Yeah.
So for me, I look at it like this. You're going to get bad habits. You're going to get this. You're going to get that. Okay, well, what's a good habit? But I mean, seriously, like I'll give you the examples. If you want to talk about proper skating technique, if you read any book, if you see any video, it's going to be 90 degrees bent at the knees.
Really?
Okay? Yeah. You got to be at 90 degrees. All right. Fine. Your toes, your knees got to be ahead of your toe.
Yeah.
Your recovery legs got to come back center line under your body, roll on the outside edge into the inside edge.
Yeah.
Your arms are going to extend just barely across the midline of your body, and you're going to be pushing out to the side at a 45-degree angle. Are you kidding me? And then we got to talk about the lean. There's like the lean of your back and how straight it is and everything else. Well, I don't know any player that skates exactly like that. And when you try to, if you ever take a kid onto the ice and you really sit there and you're like, okay, push out a 45-degree angle. Kids don't know angles. Hell, I don't even know what a 45-degree angle is sometimes. I'm not a carpenter. It's like, and 90 degrees. Like, that's tough.
So
and
even the
depending on your body structure,
technical model doesn't really bear relevance.
Oh, it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful if you see it on paper, and you got the lines drawn out. It's a beautiful thing, but not every person can go down to 90 degrees. Not everybody's hips operate the same way, or their knees, or whatnot. So, like when I look at players, yeah, you're going to fix a few things here and there. You're going to see things that are hiccups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are easy fixes that aren't going to take away from their natural movements.
Sure.
Right? You see a kid with a stick coming above his head, or his arms flaying way out to the side. Okay, let's get that into a movement.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to counteract which way your leg is pushing out. Let's counteract that. So we stay within balance, but within reason. But my whole thing is that how fast you get from point A to point B doesn't matter how pretty or how ugly it looks. It's who gets there faster.
Mm. Mm.
And if we're going to talk about edges or we're going to talk about turns, it's not about how nice or how little spray you have of the ice coming up or how much you dig. It's how much balance are you in when you come in and when you exit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you gain speed or do you lose speed?
Mm.
Or do you maintain? Like let's figure out these like little parts, and then we can work on those kind of things.
Mm. Mm.
But to sit there like the whole technical model, there's no such thing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, and there is, I mean, like you say, there are movement patterns in skating that are more or less efficient or more or less effective, but they have to be contextualized against the demands of the roles that you're performing. So for me, it makes total sense that the kinds of movements that, say, a center ice would make would be really quite different from the kinds of movements than a forward player or a defenseman would make. Because, a defenseman has to skate backwards a lot.
Yep.
A lot more than a forward player would, for example.
Right. But we sit there, and I'll give you an example. You can go to any hockey practice that you have there in England, or any hockey camp that you see advertised, and on a Monday they'll probably work on forward stride.
Mm-hmm.
So no pucks, going down straight on the ice and working on length of stride.
Right.
So how far out can you push that leg? You can recover it back and push it back out. So it looks absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll always ask these people is like, okay, let's go turn on an NHL game today. and honestly tell me how many times these guys are in a forward stride motion, like just forward stride. They're doing crossovers. They're doing quick shuffles. They're doing inside edges, outside edges. Like there's barely any time that they're doing it, but we sit there and we spend hours and hours and hours doing this. And then you see the testimonials from the players or the parents after the camps. My God, my kid improved a lot. Well, improved in which way? In the sense that he couldn't do that forward stride the way that the coach wanted to do on Monday, and now he can do it Friday in that model. Sure, we can say he improved. That he couldn't balance somehow. There's some guys that'll sit out there and they'll work on edge work, and they'll put their elbows on the ice and they'll balance on their head as they hold it. And on Monday, it's just just terrible on the ice where everybody's falling over. But on Friday, they're able to hold it, and they're like, now we got body control. Right. So is this where we mark the improvement, that they couldn't do it Monday, but they can do it Friday? But then you see the parents will come back and they'll be like, well, little Timmy didn't have a good season this year. He didn't improve in games. Well, why not? I thought he improved skill-wise. Yeah, but it didn't transfer. But you said he did transfer. You said you kept seeing these improvements. So that's why I kind of think like a lot of these things are just these technical models that you want to call it. They're easily sold or marketed as more like a scam in my sense, because we can all see improvement on something that's not very fluid or game-like. But cognitively, where you stress the brain and you stress the body and moving in different situations all the time, you can't really put an analytical stamp on it if he got better or not, because you don't know until it actually arises again.
Yeah.
And this is where you and I had this little bit of a Twitter DM back and forth where I was talking about where I have to, go in and say, how can I prove that what I'm doing is working? Because there's no hard numbers.
No.
So it's a tough game where, I think it's with any sport. You can always make the narrative to your position if you want, but you got to be able to look and see what the best position is going to be for the players that you come in contact with.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for us, and you were kind of, I guess, asked to a certain extent, and I guess we all come up against this, which is prove it. Prove that what you're doing works. And short of, well, look, it's difficult, So, but part of the problem is because of people's misunderstanding of what skill is. So people mistake technical improvement with skill. So you can understand in a camp, right? In many ways, I sort of totally get it, right? That somebody pays X hundred or whatever it is dollars to go on a camp, or a parent. What they want to see is that Timmy at the start looked like that, and at the end now looks like that. And they go, great, worth my money, because so the assumption is that a technical improvement, and you've got a short window of time. So in reality, right, you could spend 5 days or 3 days working like we do, and that individual wouldn't look a great deal different necessarily. They may have become far more perceptually attuned, but they might not look like they're any kind of different player. And it may not even, kind of visually materialize. Exactly. So, and it takes a lot longer. Now, it's our argument is it takes longer, but the end product is so much better. Now, we went back and forth with what on Twitter, you and I, in the DMs when I had my little situation here, and what I actually just came up with was I had the players talk. Yeah.
I had the actual players, instead of me trying to defend my position, which I did, and the numbers spoke for themselves, was I had the players go up and just start telling them what their experiences were.
Yeah. And
the players' experiences sold it, because they're the ones that are actually in the game. And like what we always tell we always tell everybody is like, it's going to look like chaos to a degree, because the game's chaos anyway. But it's going to look like chaos to a degree. But what's going on inside the head, we have no idea of measuring right now. We don't have the equipment, or the club doesn't have the equipment to measure it. But what's able to come out of it is that you're going to see down the line that these guys are picking up the cues faster, easier. Competition's getting quicker. It's just the way it moves. And players themselves are always going to tell the truth. I think we run into the field where everybody wants hard knocks, stamp of approval, numbers right away, and parents want to see technical mastery quickly. Yeah. That's where we run into it.
And it's that mistake of technical improvement equating to skill acquisition or skill development. And then people that kind of make that mistake, but it's super seductive. I totally get it. People are massively, but it's fool's gold. It's absolutely fool's gold.
Well, with all the camps in the world, and just take every single sport. Take every sport, and every sport runs camps. Every sport runs academies. Why isn't there more professional positions? Why aren't there more professional teams? Why aren't all these kids and all these parents that are paying all this money for the kids to get better, why aren't they translated into being just top-notch millionaires? Because the technical part it plays a thing, and it's part of the skill, but the skill is the one that you can actually put to use all the time.
Yeah.
It has to be useful.
Yeah, I mean, and one of your big KPIs, and you're closer to this than most. So in many ways, you have this, which I think is a particular advantage, is you're working with 17, 18-year-olds who are within, I guess, touching, and slightly younger than that as well, but they're kind of within touching distance of professional contracts. And I suppose one of your KPIs or one of your measures is what happens to those individuals, how many of them are converting into professional ranks. And when you started, your baseline, as I understand it, pretty low.
Right.
And now you're getting quite a lot of NHL draftees. Therefore, can't, if, they can't all be bad, can it?
No, like I said, like in 2 years, we had 14 guys drafted. 3 guys, not of those 14, 3 other guys got free agent NHL contracts.
Mm-hmm.
This year, up on our top team, we have, from our junior levels that we moved up, 11 of the 20 guys on the roster are from the junior age. So they're 19, 20, 21 years old. And now all of a sudden the president of the club wants 6 more for next year from coming up from juniors.
Doesn't quite work like that.
It doesn't, but the sad thing is we have players that could probably step in next year. 6.
So you're a victim of your own success now.
I guess. No, I don't know. No. No, but you guys, like, I understand what he's saying is that he wants guys ready and he wants guys coming up. And I think a president's role or a GM's role is always to make sure that they're pushing their employees to put out their best.
Yeah.
And he understands there's going to take a little bit more time, but to have 6 prospects coming up from the next group coming up, he always wants to make sure that they're coming up into our pro ranks, which is great because when you look at like teams like Manchester United, Man City, or Barcelona, Ajax, you're having that club. You have the system coming in.
Mm-hmm.
The more people you can get up into the pro team coming from home, the better the attendance, the more culture. The culture is going to keep growing. And, everybody wants to keep coming back and be part of the process and be part of the homegrown stuff. So it's great. Some nights you stay up, late at night, or you don't sleep at all. You're trying to figure out stuff, but you can't complain.
I mean, that's the great thing, isn't it? I spent some time working with a couple of Premiership football academies, and really great, humble guys, just keen to learn. And on the wall in one of their academies is the list of names of players that, some of them are not longer with the club, but have either, kind of got professional contracts or become internationals or whatever. And I'm like, that's your trophy cabinet right there. Mm-hmm. That's it. You should be really proud of that. And I think they'd almost a little bit lost sight of it, as being that's their legacy right there. And how you're regarded as a producer of talented athletes and the production line. I think a talent developer's role is always to have an oversupply of talent for the senior team. You almost want, if some of them you want and therefore what then the guys who are in the senior team, knowing you've got these
coming up,
really good players coming up, they've got to be on their game,
Yep.
And that drives that culture of improvement.
Yeah, keep that competition level there. And then also like here in Russia, it's the same thing like with all the football too. All of a sudden you have that overstock, that overhead of talent on your thing. Now you start loaning the players out as well. So all of a sudden, like other teams, they need cheap entry level pros or whatnot. You're handing out your talent to build up, and it just also is a big attraction too for the kids that are growing up outside the city that want to come into the club later. But you know what? And then I think the biggest part about it too is that these guys that you are able to create and you do it the right way. I don't want to say create. that you help get to a level.
Yes.
When it's personable, when the guys are having fun, and I'm talking fun at all the levels.
Yes.
Our guys, we joke around with our guys on the ice so much. And then they send you WhatsApp messages later, just, you know, some fun stuff. You understand that they buy in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the best part about it is that when their careers are over, they're going to come back because they want to be part of that process.
And that I think is one of the truly great moments. And it's a good way, I think, for us to round up the conversation, because I'm conscious that I've already taken up enough of your time. I was even late starting tonight because I got held up. But hey, Ted, I've really enjoyed discussing this with you, having this conversation. Learned a ton. People might want to get in touch. I know you're pretty active on Twitter. You're also pretty busy, but you're also very willing to give of your time. How do people reach out to you and get in touch? I know you're busy with your own podcast project and website and all that stuff. So, yeah, how do they get in touch with you?
And the thing I call a family as well. No.
Oh yeah. Don't forget them. Yeah.
No, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Suikonen Hockey, SUIHKONEN Hockey. The podcast is on Apple iTunes, The Skill Factor, Suikonen Hockey. So, you know, I'm open for everybody. I just want to give back to the community. Like, the game's given me a lot, and we learn from everybody. I learn from you all the time, and Sean and all the guys on Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's fun seeing the debate sometimes, just sitting back and letting it roll. But, you know, my closing argument, or not argument, but saying is that I don't think anybody should pigeonhole themselves into one. Everybody's got to have that open mind where everything connects with itself. Mm-hmm. We're all in the game to get better, and there's things that are out there that people want to argue that it's this way or that way. Open up, because at the end of the day, it's not about us. It's about the players that we work with.
Yeah.
And what we can give them is the best.
Yeah.
And that's what we owe them.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And I guess that's where we would certainly meet, in the perspective of that kind of athlete-centeredness. You know, right. I have a particular lens on things because, you know, for a long time I was doing things because of what I wanted to do and what I wanted them to do, as opposed to working at it the other way around. And for me, the kind of ecological conception is always kind of asking you to conceive of the athlete first. You know. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's where we certainly philosophically agree.
Of course we do. But I appreciate you having me on, Stu. I really appreciate it.
No, and like I said, I've always said the podcast is only as good as the guests. So you've been fantastic in your sharing your insights and your thoughts around the experience that you're trying to provide for athletes. So thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.